Today's story is titled, My Son Keeps Coming Home from School in Clothes I Never Bought Him, by imfunerals. The link to the story is in the description below. Please enjoy. I became a paramedic because I wanted to be the person who showed up on time. I wasn't, when it mattered most. Her name was Renee. She was 34 years old. She drove a blue Subaru, and she had this habit of leaving her coffee cup on the roof of the car when she loaded groceries, then driving away and calling me 20 minutes later, laughing about how she'd done it again. I have 17 voicemails from her on my phone. I've never deleted them. I've never listened to them again either. They sit there, a voice on a screen. She was on Route 9 when the other driver ran the light. I was 4 minutes away. I know that because I've thought about it every day for 2 years. About what 4 minutes mean. About what I could have done with 4 minutes. Whether 4 minutes was always going to be the difference, or whether it was just the number the universe picked to make sure I'd spend the rest of my life suffering over it. I was not her paramedic. They pulled me off the scene before I could be, which was the right call, which I would have made myself or anyone else, but it didn't make it easier to sit there in the back of a unit with my hands shaking while other people tried to do what I couldn't. She died at 4:17 p.m. in December. Toby was 11. He's 12 now. I'm grateful he'll still remember her. That's the thing I'm most grateful for, and the thing that hurts the most, depending on the day. The house got quiet after she died. Not immediately. Immediately, there were people everywhere. Her sister, my mother, and the neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years all showed up with casserole dishes and apologies. The house was full for about a week, and then one day it wasn't, and I realized that all the noise had been a kind of buffer between me and what my new reality was. It sounded like Toby watching TV in his room with the volume on low. It sounded like one person making coffee in the morning instead of two. I went back to work 6 weeks later, earlier than I should have, and earlier than the crew said. I told myself Toby was okay, that he was resilient, that kids are resilient, which I now know is something people say about kids when they need kids to be resilient, because the alternative is too much for them to carry. Toby didn't fight me on it. He just nodded, went to school, came home, did his homework, ate whatever I put in front of him, and went to bed. He was so easy that I didn't understand that easy wasn't the same as okay. We talked. We just didn't say anything. I'd ask about school and he'd say, fine. I'd ask about any new friends and he'd shrug. I'd say goodnight and he'd say goodnight back. And I'd stand in the hallway outside his door, looking at him for a moment, trying not to cry, before I went to my own room. I still had her nightstand on her side, which I hadn't moved, which I wasn't ready to move. That was us, the shape of our life. I tried telling myself it would get easier. The first time Toby came home in clothes I didn't recognize, it was a cold day in November. A sweater. It was dark gray and was cable knit, the kind that was thick-seamed that you can feel when you run your thumb along them. I noticed it immediately because it was the kind of sweater I couldn't afford, not with the hours I was working and what hours cost in this county when you're doing them alone. Where'd you get that? Toby looked down at himself like he'd forgotten he was wearing it. Eli gave it to me. Mine got dirty. Who's Eli? Just someone from school. He dropped his backpack by the stairs and went to the fridge, and I stood there with a dish towel in my hand, thinking about the sweater. It was expensive. It also fit him perfectly. Not a hand-me-down fit, with it loose in the shoulders or short on the sleeves, but actually perfect, like it had been bought for him, like it had been bought specifically for him. I told myself it was nothing. I was good at that by then. A week later, it was a pair of boots, Timberland Pros, waterproof, steel-toed, and brand spanking new. Toby said Eli's feet were bigger, so he gave them to him. Then came a pair of expensive raw denim jeans, then a leather jacket that looked like it cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Each time, the explanation was the same. Mine got dirty. Eli let me have his spares. Eli said he doesn't need them. In my line of work, we're trained on mechanism of injury. You look at the damage to the car to understand the damage to the spine. And, I'll admit, I started looking for the damage on Toby. I'd catch him coming in at 6 p.m., 2 hours after the bus usually dropped him off. I'd perform a visual sweep before he took his coat off. I looked for petechiae around his neck. I looked for defensive wounds on his forearms. I even started checking his pupils when he sat down for dinner, looking for a sluggish response to see if he'd been drugged or sedated. Physical findings, 0. Toby looked healthier than he had in years. He had color in his cheeks. His hands were calloused and covered in white dust. Limestone, I realized, the same stuff they mine at the quarry. But the psychological indicators were redlining. Everything in his world was now filtered through a single syllable: Eli. Eli says we're working on a project. Eli's place is cooler than ours. Eli gave me this because he said I look cold. He never said Eli's parents. He never mentioned a house. He just said Eli's place. And in my mind, that space began to look like a studio apartment, or a van, or a crawl space in the woods. I began to picture Eli as a 28-year-old with a squirrelish voice and an evil plan. The paranoia became a constant adrenaline spike anytime my mind would race. Yesterday, Toby came home with a bruise on his cheek. It was a contusion, maybe 2 centimeters across. What happened to your face? I realized I didn't even say hello. I just grabbed his chin, tilting his head towards the light to get a better look. It's nothing. We were just clearing stuff out at Eli's and I tripped. Clearing what out? Where did you even go after school, Toby? I've checked the school roster. There isn't an Eli in the 7th grade or 8th grade. Toby pulled his face out of my hand. The easy, shy kid was gone. He's not at my school, Toby said flatly. My stomach dropped. My heart was probably doing 110. How old is he? Where does he live? Why is he giving you a leather jacket, Toby? Adult men don't give kids clothes for no reason. He's my friend! Toby shouted. It was the loudest the house had been in years. He's the only person who actually talks to me at school. Why have you been acting so weird about him? I'm trying to protect you. From what? Having a life? Toby's eyes were wide and wet, identical to Renee's the day she died. Why aren't you just happy I'm not alone anymore? Just because your life ended when Mom died doesn't mean mine has to. He didn't wait for my response. He stormed upstairs and slammed the door so hard that a framed photo of Renee fell off the hallway wall. I put it back on the wall and just stood in the dark, realizing I had lost the scene entirely. I spent the rest of the night sitting at the kitchen table, performing a mental map of the last 2 years, looking for the exact moment the internal hemorrhaging had started. My training is designed to fix physical trauma, broken bones, stalled hearts, collapsed lungs, what have you. But there isn't a tourniquet in the world that can stop the bleeding in a broken home. The next morning was silent. Toby left for the bus at 7. He was wearing a new jacket, a hefty black canvas work coat with a corduroy collar. It looked expensive and far too heavy for a middle schooler's backpack. I didn't ask where he got it, or even say goodbye. I just watched him walk down the driveway, my heart doing a steady, anxious 110. I tried to be the good dad for the next 48 hours. I told myself I was overreacting. I went to my shift and tried to focus on the radio chatter. but every walk-away call from the north side made my skin crawl. When I got home Thursday morning, I did something I promised Renee I'd never do. I searched his room. I felt like a predator myself, creeping through his space while he was at school. I didn't find a smoking gun. I didn't find drugs or burner phones, but I found the gifts. Tucked into the back of his closet were 3 more hoodies, 2 pairs of expensive boots, and a leather-bound journal with high-quality cream paper. None of it has been used. It was just stored there, like he didn't want me to see it. I pulled out one of the hoodies, a thick gray zip-up. I pressed it to my face. It didn't smell like Toby or our house. It was the scent of organic Clover laundry soap, but beneath it, I smelled something else. Limestone. It was the same white powder I'd seen on the boots of the workers at the quarry. My clinical brain went into overdrive. Toby wasn't just meeting Eli at school, he was going to the quarry. That afternoon, when Toby came home, the easy kid was gone for good. He walked past me in the kitchen, and I saw the way he was moving. It was guarded. He was protecting his ribs. "Toby, stop," I said, my voice dropping. "Take off your hoodie." "No." He didn't even turn around. "I'm not asking, Toby. You're guarding your left side. Did he hit you? Did Eli hit you?" Toby spun around, and for a second, I saw Renee's fire in his eyes.
"Nobody hit me! We were working! We're building something, okay? Something real!"
"Building what? Why are you going to the quarry? All the clothes are covered in limestone." Toby froze. His pupils dilated, a classic fear-flight response.
"How do you know where I go?"
"Because I'm your father. You're 12 years old, Toby. Why is a man giving you tailored clothes and work jackets? Why is he isolating you from me?"
"He's not isolating me!"
Toby screamed.
"You isolate me! You've been a zombie since Mom died! You just work and come home and sit in front of the TV and eat pizza!"
The words hit me, and I felt my breath hitch. He didn't just slam his door this time. I heard the lock click. I sat in the hallway for hours, staring at the closed door. In my line of work, we talk about the golden hour, that critical window of time after a traumatic injury where medical intervention has the highest likelihood of preventing death. I realized, sitting there on the carpet, that my window had likely closed weeks ago. I didn't try to open the door. I just went to the kitchen, poured a cup of coffee I didn't want, and sat in the dark. The next morning, Toby left for school without breakfast. I watched from the window as he walked down the driveway towards the bus stop. He looked like a stranger, or like a man going to work. I called out from work that day. I told them I had a family emergency, which felt like the first honest thing I'd said in years. I sat in my truck 2 blocks away from the middle school, tucked behind a row of parked cars. I felt the shame of it, the stalking, the lack of trust on my end, but the paramedic in me overrode the father. I told myself I was evaluating the environment. I told myself I was looking for the source of the limestone dust. At 3:15, the bell rang. I watched the students pour out in a chaotic wave. Then I saw him. Toby wasn't alone. He was walking with a group of 3 other boys. They were jostling each other, laughing, and for a split second, I saw my son, the 12-year-old kid. I felt a surge of relief so sharp it made my hands go limp on the steering wheel. I almost turned the key. I almost went home to move Renee's nightstand and wait for him with an apology. But then the group reached the corner of the street, and the other boys turned towards the bus stop. Toby didn't. He kept walking, heading straight towards the gravel paths that led into the deeper parts of town. I put the truck in gear and followed from a distance, watching him navigate the rocky terrain. He didn't look back once. He stopped at a small cedar-shingled house tucked into a clearing of trees, about 4 miles from the quarry. A man was standing on the porch. He was tall, dressed in a quarryman's uniform. As Toby approached, the man stepped down and met him halfway. He reached out and pulled my son into a paternal side hug. He ruffled Toby's hair, said something that made Toby smile, and ushered him inside. Condition fucking red. I didn't think about scene safety or about calling for backup. All I saw was a grown man taking my son into his house I didn't recognize. I sprinted across the street. I'm not proud of what came next. I hammered my fist on that door. It swung open, and the man stood there, looking startled. He looked remarkably average. He had a pair of reading glasses perched on his head and a smudge of white dust on his cheek.
"Where is he?"
I screamed.
"Where the hell is my son?"
The man blinked, holding up his hands.
"Whoa, take it easy. What are you talking about?" "I know he's in here. Are you Eli? You touch him again, and I will fucking kill you."
The man's expression shifted from fear to deep confusion. "I'm not Eli," he said slowly. Eli's my son." He turned his head slightly. "He's in the kitchen with his friend. May I ask who you are?" The adrenaline in my system evaporated at once, leaving me cold. I looked into the house. It wasn't a grooming den, or anything of the other insane things I'd pictured for weeks. It was a home. There was a half-finished puzzle on the coffee table. There were muddy work boots by the door. In the kitchen, a woman was helping Toby and another boy, a kid with freckles and the same build as Toby, scrub mud off their arms in the sink. The smell, that sweet clover scent, it was coming from the laundry room.
"It's an organic soap,"
the woman said, looking at me with concern.
"Our son has a skin condition. It's the only thing that doesn't cause a reaction."
I'm so sorry. I'm Toby's father. I stammered, dragging my hand down my face. The man let out a long breath.
"Oh man, we've been trying to get a hold of you. Toby said you worked 72-hour rotations at the station. He told us your wife passed away. I'm Mark,"
he said, holding out his hand. I shook it and looked at Toby. He was standing by the sink, holding a damp paper towel. He looked ashamed. He looked at their messy living house, and then he looked at me like I was the intruder.
"We've been letting the boys help me build a stone fire pit in the back,"
Mark said, gesturing towards the limestone blocks visible through the window.
"Toby's a hard worker, but he's a messy one. He kept ruining his school clothes, so we just started giving him Eli's spares. They're the same size, and Eli outgrows everything in a month anyway."
"He told us he didn't have any clean clothes because he said you worked long hours. He said he didn't want to bother you,"
Eli's mother added softly.
We just wanted him to be warm."
I stood in the middle of their living space and realized I was the only dead thing in the room. Toby hadn't been stolen. He had found a family that was still whole, and he was trying to borrow enough of their life to survive the one in mine. Toby got up and grabbed my arm, not looking at Mark or his wife, or at Eli.
I'm sorry again,"
I called out, following Toby out of the house. I didn't say anything on the drive home. Toby stared out the window, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the blurring trees. When we got inside our house, the silence hit me. The kitchen was clean. Renee's empty chair was still tucked perfectly under the table.
"I'm sorry, Tobes,"
I said. Toby stopped at the foot of the stairs. He didn't look back at me.
You didn't even know his last name, Dad.
He said quietly.
You didn't even ask if he was my age.
He went upstairs. I heard the door click shut. I'm sitting at the kitchen table now. Renee's chair is still tucked in perfectly across from me. I've never moved it. I don't know why I haven't moved it, but maybe I'll move it tomorrow. I spent weeks convincing myself a stranger was talking to my son. I never stopped long enough to ask him about his new best friend.